So, welcome to Real Stories in Real Estate. I'm your host, Denise Laframboise, and today I have Gabriel Brutto with me. I don't know if you want me to say Gabriel. My husband's name is Gabriel.
Doesn't matter. Gabriel's good. Gabe's good.
Gabe. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and you are here from Brutto Law. So, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Denise. Thanks for having me.
And we're going to talk about the exciting world of purchase contracts.
Sounds good.
So, I mean, I know we're seeing it a lot, and I'm sure you're seeing it a lot too. People who sign a purchase contract and will do, like, say, a resale property to start with, right? They go, they find a house, they love it, they sign a contract, they feel pressured because there's other offers. So they put no condition of financing, and then they show up on our doorstep, and we're like, why did you buy this house? You can't buy it.
That's definitely an issue. I think that to a lesser degree today than it used to, because I'm seeing this problem arise more so in pre-construction condos than in resale, just because buyers have a lot more leverage in buying resale now. So the absence of conditions with respect to financing is pretty I'm finding. So people are wising up to that, and frankly, they have they have more bargaining power than they used to. So they're not going in unconditional on resale. It's the condo market that I see being very problematic these days, because there's a lot of buyers that purchased off the plans, up to 5, 7, 8 years ago, even in certain circumstances, not knowing when the product would actually hit the market and when they would need to close.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in many cases, they would have overpaid for those condos, and therefore their appraised values when they go to get financing are coming in significantly lower than uh, fair market.
Yeah. And
Sorry,
we see a lot of them that actually, like,
than the APS value.
yeah, and then you buy it 8 years ago, 7 years ago, you're like, "Of course it's gonna go up in value." Pre-con always goes up in value. I'm gonna put this 20%, or sometimes it's even 10% or less now,
Right.
that builders weren't requiring as much deposit. And then they're like, "Oh, well, I'll just sell it. If it gets built, I'll just sell it." But now you look at the one across the street is selling for less, and you're actually potentially farther ahead to just walk away, and the thought process always was, well, I'll walk away and they'll keep my deposit and they'll sell it to someone else. But what are you seeing happen to these people?
So it's almost always the case now, in my experience recently, that builders don't just allow that to happen that seamlessly, especially considering the fact that I would say the majority of the deals I'm seeing closing today were signed in peak market. If you think about it, we're in 2020, early 2026, 21, 22 would have been peak. It makes sense that they're coming to market today, right? 4 years later, 5 years later. And so as a result, there's a significant delta between the APS value versus the appraised value. So when you look at the deposits that the builder's holding, sometimes it's 10%, sometimes it's 20%, as you mentioned. So they do vary. However, it's almost never enough to cover the shortfall that a builder would experience in the event that they had to resell. So a security deposit exists for the purposes of compensating the vendor in the event that they have to resell the property and that they're short on the sale. And then typically whatever the shortfall difference is captured in that deposit. But now we're seeing a significant shortfall even beyond the deposit amount. So I'll give you a very basic example. If you paid $1 million for a property pre-construction and you put $100,000 down, but that property today is only worth 800, that builder's still out an extra 100 on top of the deposit in the differential between what they realized as a sale price today and what they bargained for in the agreement of purchase and sale. So they're still out 100 plus. They didn't anticipate having to pay additional agent fees of having to relist the property. So you could be dinged for that as well, because they're going to pay commission to relist it on the open market. So why would the builder, give up that shortfall, right?
Right. And I guess when you have to prove damages, it's pretty easy to prove that we sold
Mhm.
it to you for this and now we're selling it to someone else for this.
You got it.
Right.
And from the builder's perspective, you got to look at what they're going through on their end, right? They've got construction financing that's creeping up on them that they've got to pay off. You know, there was development charges that they paid that were, you know, in all likelihood very exorbitant, right? Because they've been very high for a long time. And they've got other costs that are just eating into their margins. So they have every incentive to go after that differential. And they do, and they are. In almost every single case where I've had a client that was unable to close, not only have they threatened litigation for the difference, but they're actually pursuing litigation. And when you think about it, it's worth their while because a lot of people bought these condos on spec as, you know, investment properties. I'd say a greater percentage of people bought these. I'm just speculating here, but I'm going to guess that a greater percentage of people bought pre-construction condos as investments than they did to be primary residences. So therefore, if you're thinking about it from the perspective of the builder, there's a good chance that these people own other properties.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm going after somebody that has no assets,
Yeah.
right? It's worth my while to pursue that lawsuit. So unfortunately, it's not as simple as walking away. If the market was more robust, I'd say, you know, you could take your chances a little easier, but not today.
Well, and I think sometimes like it brings up a really valid point of like people think things have always been this way, so it'll always be this way, right? Builders previously were not suing people for the damage, but they weren't experiencing this big of a loss on a property either, right? And also, like people in general were not losing on pre construction. It was very normal for a long time to buy something and have it be worth a lot more at closing, but it doesn't mean it's guaranteed to be so.
No, and you know that's been sort of the greatest illusion, especially in the condo market. It was way overinflated for way too long, and you know when people are speculating that shouldn't be speculating, that's when you know the bubble's about to burst, right?
Well, so that and I find like the lack of treating it like a real contract. Like I see a lot of people come to us and they bought a pre-construction 5 years ago or 4 years ago and it's like, "Okay, so who is the lawyer that reviewed this
That's right.
contract for you when
Lots
you
of people weren't
signed
doing
it?"
they weren't getting their reviews done.
No, and they were just, "Oh, well, I was gonna figure that out later." Okay, well, who pre-approved you for this mortgage? And, like, what kind of, like, contingency did you put in for that the interest rates are more than double what they were at the time that you bought this?
Absolutely. And it goes beyond that too, right? If you're not getting your lawyer to review the pre-construction contracts, you're also not going to capture a lot of other builders adjustments that come up on closing that people are blindsided by when they go to close, right? Things like development charge differentials, levy differentials, things like that.
HST inclusion is a big one we
Right.
see.
Right. So you know, those are very substantial, right? This has been an ongoing issue, right? And now on top of it, they're sprung with the deficit between the APS value and the appraised value on top of the builder's adjustment. So it's just, you know, yeah, definitely highly recommended to have a lawyer review your pre-construction contract. That's why there's a cooling off period. That's why it exists.
Yeah, and it's important, like, how many builders contracts would you look at and be like, "Nope, this one's good. Just sign it as is. We won't put anything in," right? We won't try and cap anything at all. We'll just take this exactly for how it's written.
And they know what we're going to ask for. So they a lot of times the builders had these caps pre-prepared in advance.
Yeah.
And now as a buyer, you have even more leverage. So if you're really in the market for pre-construction right now, I don't even get a lot of pushback on some of the requests that we're submitting. And some of the requests I would even argue are somewhat unreasonable, even from our perspective. Like I've submitted caps at zero and got
Really? Yeah, but I mean, there's a huge plug for like not only should you absolutely get it reviewed by a lawyer to protect yourself, but on top of it, like it could save you money, and in most cases does. Like, why wouldn't someone do this?
it always saves you money. Always. The
Right?
cost of a legal review is dwarfed by the savings.
And
Always.
it's not like for people who have bought resale and not bought from a builder, like your resale contract 5 pages, 6 pages. It's pretty self-explanatory. Anybody can read this and understand it in fairly clear, plain language. A builder's contract, it might be 50, 60 pages with all kinds of different things and clauses and just all kinds of stuff that you're like, what does this even mean? And does it apply to me? And does it cost me money or not? How do you know if you don't have an expert help you with that?
Exactly. Absolutely right.
The other thing I'll say about the builder ones, like when you buy a pre-built property, it's often the case that there's a clause that you have to get a mortgage approval or a mortgage pre-approval. A lot of people do not realize that there are times where if there's a lender on site there, that they actually can do like a blanket appraisal specialized pre-approval that doesn't actually exist out in the market and in the world. We can look at your numbers like as a mortgage broker and say, yeah, you qualify for this at today's rates if you don't change your job, change your debts, change anything, and nothing changes with this purchase price or property taxes, you'll be fine. But I can't guarantee it. But sometimes a lender on site can actually guarantee financing or even waive conditions so that you qualify for that even 5 years down the road, as long as something doesn't change.
That's pretty awesome.
Right, and, I have one on a pre-construction property, and I actually have an interest rate, like, 1% lower than anything that exists in the market right now because we bought it in 2021, and we had this blanket approval, and so sometimes, like, even I like everybody to use us, right? Like, I like to do everybody's mortgage, but the reality is on some of these pre-builds, if there is, say, the construction financing company also has a lender on site, there's things they can do that others can't that can benefit you or be kind of like an insurance in the future. So it's
I've seen I've seen construction financing institutions. I think RBC has done this on several occasions where they're so over levered on the site because the values decline so much that they're willing to actually offer financing to those buyers just so that they don't have this massive amount of default.
yeah, well, and play that out, right? So sometimes, say it's a big condo building or a big development where you've got tons of properties. And so I've seen this from a lot of our big banks, RBC, TD, CIBC, I've seen where they have the construction financing. And so they're on the hook for that property anyways.
Right? They don't want to own it. They'd rather distribute their risk across multiple unit owners than, be entirely dependent on the builder to pay out that financing. If
Right.
they can mitigate their risk by offloading some of that debt to the buyers, that's why they're offering those types of products. And a lot of times the loan to value ratios being offered are significantly higher than what you would normally be able to achieve.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I have seen that recent. That's because of the value decline between the date of purchase and the date of closing.
Yeah, and well, and it's a way for them to protect their risk, right? They then know who these buyers are, that they have jobs, that the site is likely to go from, being construction mortgage to being an actual like
Right.
separated property sold, right?
Especially if they're rentals, at least they know there's a cash flow there. They're not gonna wanna take over a building that's potentially in distress and then try to rent it all out.
Yeah. And so, from a risk perspective, we have seen some of them have things where you can become what we call broker complete, right? They get all of their conditions done way ahead. I have seen people lose their jobs and be unemployed and still get these mortgages to close because it was signed off 4
Oh,
years
wow.
before,
That's incredible.
right?
I didn't know
So,
that was
usually they're at a higher rate than the going rate. So, but it's still, so there are times where somebody has this, but we're like, that's 2% higher than what's normal. But sometimes it is an insurance that protects you. So it's always worth like chatting with the lender on site if you are buying a property like that.
absolutely. That's great. That's great advice.
And then do you want to talk about so resale? So if we're talking about resale contracts, not the builder contracts, and there is somebody who makes a purchase and then they want to back out of it and they do not have a condition in place to do so. Like what is the process for dealing with the enforcement of those contracts or getting out of those contracts?
So if you're a buyer and you try to walk away, the difficulty with these is you could cause a very lengthy chain reaction. It's becoming less and less common today. But a lot of times, if somebody's relying on that sale to happen because they ultimately need the proceeds from that sale to go buy or close on a purchase that they committed to, then you as a buyer that's walking away could be responsible not only for the damages that are triggered just on that particular sale, but also for damages that are caused to your seller by virtue of them not being able to close on their subsequent purchase, right? So these situations can get very dicey. And then again, I mean, with the decline of the market, is it that easy for that seller to just say, okay, I'll just relist it and sell it to the next person? In a hotter market, it's certainly more plausible. You could just list it and sell it. But if you waited 6 months in some cases or longer to get that buyer, how are you supposed to just relist that property and try to find a new buyer immediately? Your damages as that prospective buyer can be very significant, right? Because you're going to pay for the carrying costs if they sue you, right? You'll
Yep.
pay for the carrying costs of that property from the date that you're supposed to close to the ultimate closing date of the next closing sale. The differential in the purchase price, which inevitably these days it looks like there will be, especially when you've already, like, when you walk away from that purchase, there's also a perception that maybe there's something wrong with the property.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Not necessarily
stigmatize the
always,
property,
but
right?
you're stigmatizing. That's the
Yeah.
right word. You're stigmatizing that property. In many cases, they're selling for less on the next round. Plus, the seller's now more desperate, so they may take a lower sale price, especially if they were hoping to be able to go buy something else. It just increases the desperation of the seller, and they may be more likely to take a lower sale price, and so on and so forth. So the days of just signing a mutual release and saying, okay, here's, just keep my deposit, or let's make a deal, keep part of my deposit, we walk away. I mean, those days are kind of over. I think there's real damages that are being realized by that seller.
Yeah, and I do think, like, some of the damages come from, like, the public having more access too, right? Like, we can go on House Sigma or wherever, and we can see it was listed, it was sold, it came off, it came back on the market, like, so
But
you
it's just
tend to
there.
make those assumptions, right? Whereas you may have not had access to that information the same way before.
And any realtor that's diligent is going to do that analysis for you as well. So yeah, again, it's highly recommended. I mean, it's always recommended, but especially now, you have to have, as a buyer, a host of conditions that protect you so that you can firm up the deal with absolute confidence and knowing that you can close.
Well, and I just think if there is a situation where it's not gonna happen, like, giving them more time is better, right? Like, when we see these ones fall apart, like, close to closing,
Yeah.
it just makes it that much worse for somebody else to recover from that and more likely that there's gonna be more damages, right?
Now, sellers are certainly more open to allowing extensions these days. It's not uncommon. I've been there many times recently, but it's also not uncommon for them to charge for those extensions, right? So
Yeah,
they're going to pass along all the carrying costs of the property, the legal costs, and potentially even just some kind of arbitrary fee
right,
for the delay. Again, it's not pretty if you can't close on resale, especially.
right. And I mean, the reality is, like, how can we help ourselves? Well, not getting in that position in the first place. What
Yeah.
are key
Make
things?
you talk to your broker, get your financing in order, have a backup on a backup on a backup
Yeah,
just in case, right? I mean, sometimes you see lenders backing out at the last minute for, the most obscure reasons, right?
yeah.
Especially if they're not A banks, right? If they're I've seen some very interesting situations where banks walk away 2 days before closing, say you didn't meet conditions for whatever reason.
Yeah, well, I will say, like, I have not seen that on anything that has been broker complete at least 10 business days before financing.
I need a good broker to
Right?
make sure.
But once you get into, like, the final periods and you're like, "Yeah, I said I'd send in that pay stub," or whatever, like, once you get into that 10 business days before closing window and you're not done yet, this is where things start to fall apart because then audit departments get involved. They start reviewing every detail of the file and they find a pay stub that has something different than this pay stub, and maybe it was just the printer, but now you look like you're fraudulent, right? Like, you're causing yourself a lot of stress on the mortgage side when you leave things to last minute. Like, we always try and get everything done well ahead, but we also, like you said, backup plans, right? You're pre-approved for this, or if you need to push your budget higher, this is what it's going to look like, right? Like knowing what your backup plan is really important instead of just being out there winging it, buying something and not knowing if you have the money to do it, right?
So important. And what if the bank doesn't agree with the valuation? What if you
Yeah.
overpaid? You never know, right? I've seen that happen too, where even on resale, the appraisal comes back lower than agreement price.
Yeah.
Then what?
Yeah.
Now you have to come up with extra money.
Yeah. Do you have extra money?
Right.
Or is there a different lender that can do that, right? Like, this is where, as a broker, we're farther ahead because we can navigate who likes that area, who, is less likely to ask for an appraisal, all of these things, right?
Absolutely. I think it's important to have a broker on your side these days. I think it's more beneficial personally than just walking into your bank. So my recommendation is get a broker because they can shop across the board.
Well, and I mean, I obviously am biased that I also agree with that, but I will say that sometimes there's situations where, like we just talked about the pre-build thing, right? There's going to be times where your bank might be able to do something that a broker can't, or vice versa. And so sometimes it's worth, like, making sure that your broker is prioritizing your best interest, right? Because if we know that we can't do something on a certain building, but our friend at bank ABC can, we're still going to make sure that the client gets to the right place, because there is, some give and take in both directions, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is I so any last words for anybody signing legal contracts, signing purchase agreements, worried about what's gonna happen to their pre-con property?
I hate to say this, but I would avoid pre-con altogether. It's just you can't predict the market. There's so much
Yeah,
economic turmoil right now. I live and breathe this every single day.
yeah,
I act for a lot of private mortgage lenders as well, so I get to see appraisals all the time. I get to
yeah,
have a pretty good understanding of underwriting as well by virtue of that practice. And I can tell you, I mean, we can't predict this market. How can the average person who's not in the industry project what that end value is going to be in years from now?
right,
It's so hard. But if you are so inclined, definitely get a lawyer to review the agreement in advance.
1,000%.
But I would say resale is the way to go right now. If you're shopping, there's deals. You have leverage.
Yeah, and especially if you're, like, somebody who wants to move in a condo in the future, like, you can get that condo at
Any
such a
day, any
discount
day.
now,
Half of those buyers won't be able to close, and you'll have your pick of the litter when they come to market.
right?
That's
Okay,
my
so
prediction.
this is what we're advocating for. It's just like, go check out what is coming up for pre-cons. Don't buy it ahead, but see what's out there.
Yeah,
Because resale, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's lots of opportunity right now, and unfortunately, we see a lot of people, as do you, that bought something pre-construction, didn't do their research, didn't have it assessed, or can't meet the conditions to be able to close now.
yeah. I can understand it if somebody wants to. Sometimes people are doing it because it is their first home, and they need the deposit structure to sort of get it done over time. I get that. That's the intriguing component to buying pre-con. You have more time to come up with a down payment, and so I can see that being enticing. However, I would just take a step back and say, well, okay, but if you're taking your time to go and save that money anyways, why don't you just save the money, keep it invested in something that's liquid, and then when you're ready to buy, you buy,
Yeah,
because the market's not going up anytime soon, in my opinion.
right.
Not skyrocketing. So you're not getting a screaming deal by buying pre-construction right now.
No, and there's just you're never gonna have a guarantee of that, right? So what
No.
is the sure
So
thing?
why tie up your money with the builder? Why tie up your money there? And you know, for the next few years, you can invest that money even in something low risk under 5% return. You're
Buy
still gonna
stock in that builder's buy shares of that builder, and you'll probably make more money than you would on the pre-con that they're building,
right.
right?
So you can you still have the opportunity, even as a first time buyer, like to just keep saving your money and buy when you're ready to buy. You don't
Yeah,
have to just take advantage of the opportunity because there's a structure, right? There's a deposit structure over in 60 period or whatever they're offering.
yeah.
I just think and that's why, and builders know this, right? That's why they're stopping. That's why they're not building anything new,
Yeah.
right? Because they know we got to get rid of all the product that's already on the market, right? There's too much sitting. Why would we add more product to the market? Doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Let
if we know
everybody
that people
buy,
can't close,
right.
right,
Let
why?
everybody buy what's there, and then we'll start building new product, right?
Yeah. Well, and I always think of it like the first time buyer perspective, it's very, very simple. Like you're going to buy something with someone else's money and you don't know if they're going to give it to you or if they like what you're buying.
Right.
Like, is that scary? Because it sounds scary,
Yeah.
right? Like, whereas a resale, you can say, hey, I'm buying this thing for this much money. Do you like it? And they're like, yes. And we like you. Here's the money, right? Like, it's much simpler and easier and a bit of more of a guarantee, not so much of this hypothetical someday 5 years from now, what's it going to look like,
Now we're
right?
talking. I just want to qualify one thing. I'm talking specifically about condos,
Yeah.
like high rise condos. When you're talking about low density stuff, right? Townhouses, detached things like that, even condo town, for that matter. That's a little easier to justify because they come to market way quicker,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Your sales cycle's shorter and it's a little easier because you're not as, it's usually for a family. It's not so much like the condos for rental market was so big. So it's quite a
Absolutely.
bit different. Yes, I agree.
Not as speculative because you're not. A lot of people are buying it to be an end user,
Yeah.
not an investor. So yeah, I agree with you there for sure. And also it just doesn't take as long to build. So
Yeah.
you're not predicting the market 5 years, 6 years down the road. You're basically just saying, I like this price. And if I take delivery in 18 months, I'm happy with the price I paid.
Hmm.
Because the market's not going to tank in the next 18 months. Even if
Yeah.
it goes,
Yeah.
you're not really losing enough to feel too bad about it, and you're getting something new, and you're the first one to live in it. I can appreciate that, that mentality as well. So I think that's a little easier to justify pre-construction. But the condo stuff right now, tough, very tough to justify.
100%. Well, I really appreciate you being here today and sharing your wisdom with us and what you're seeing and what you're seeing in these contracts. I bet you it'll help a lot of people who have never known that this was such an issue right now.
Yeah, no problem at all. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And if people would like to support you back for sharing all this information, where do they find you and what can you help them do?
We handle all facets of real estate transactions, so refinances, whether it's institutional, private, we do purchases, sales, pretty much anything real estate related, anything that you need. And yeah, I think that covers it. You could find our contact details at our website at bruttolaw.com. So BRUTTOLAW.com.
And you do not do like wills as well?
You know what? These days we've been staying away from doing wills because we're really busy
So
on the
busy.
refi.
Uh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
amazing.
We're very much mortgage experts, so we do a lot of mortgage transactions.
Well, I appreciate that. We love working with experts who know what th're doing and get things done efficiently like you guys do. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Denise. Appreciate your
Awesome.
time and for having me.
Okay, this was Real Stories in Real Estate. I'm your host, Denise Lafremont. You can find this podcast and other episodes anywhere you like to consume your podcasts iHeartRadio, Amazon, Spotify, and so on. Have a great day.